scary stories. I just came out of a relationship and felt like a bit of casual dating will be fun. So I went on to Tinder. I made it clear to the few people I actually matched with and spoke to that I didn't want anything serious, just a dinner date or a pub night here and there. I matched with a really cute guy. Let's call him Pete. He had just moved to my city and also wasn't looking for anything serious. He just wanted to meet some people and see some local spots. The first night we met up at a well-known tapas bar. I chose this place because I had a few friends that were waitresses and a bar staff there, so I felt safe meeting a stranger here. He was on time. We had a nice chat. Really cool guy on first impression. We spoke about work, to which he responded that he's a software developer, but he's just started his freelancing career. We spoke about where he stays now, that he's moved up from here, and he said that he's sharing a place with some friends. Rent is quite pricey in this city, so it made sense to me. He asked where I live, and I told him that I'm lucky to have my own one-bedroom apartment in quite a nice and popular part of town, mostly thanks to my parents that helped me save and gave me a portion of the deposit money for my 21st birthday, which I invested and grew until I had enough to put down a decent deposit. He then offered to drop me off at home, but I said no, I'd prefer to Uber home by myself. He asked if this was because I'm going to meet someone else after him, and I laughed because I genuinely thought this was a joke. The next time I saw Pete was about 3 days later. He said he knew it was fast, but he actually couldn't stop thinking about me, and he wanted to see me again. This time, we met at a different restaurant, also one I chose because I went to school with the owner and knew all of the staff pretty well. This place is a little bit more pricey, and he got super annoyed with me for ordering as much as I did. I couldn't understand why, since I insisted on paying for my own stuff both times we met. That night, same story. Let me drop you off at home, please. Again, I said no. While we were in the middle of this conversation, he gets a call. He stopped away, but I could still hear a fair amount. No, I think I'm gonna stay with you again. Yeah, I'm with her. Don't worry about it. Okay, I'll be home soon. So now, I think he's chatting to his roommate or maybe his mom, but I don't ask. He comes back to our table. Please, I insist. Bad things happen to women that Uber home this late by themselves. I'd feel better if I dropped you off. Not having the energy to argue, I tell him fine, and I put my address into his GPS. As soon as he got home, he messages me and tells me he'll be picking me up in the morning to go for a picnic. I reply that I actually have cleaning to do, but again he insists that he'll see me at 10. Come 10 a.m. the next morning, best believe he's right outside of my apartment. I get into his car, and as he leans over to kiss my cheek, I notice that his breath stinks. Obviously, I'm a little grossed out. We have our picnic, and it's quite nice. He tried to kiss me a few times, but I have avoided it with everything in me. By about 4 p.m., I tell him that I really want to go home, and that the park we went to is about an hour and a half drive from my apartment, so I couldn't really Uber back home because it would cost a fortune. He agrees it's time to go, so we get in his car and we're off. I fall asleep in the car on the drive back, and when I wake up, he asked if we should finish the rest of the bubbly we got for mimosas up at my apartment. I said to him that I don't want to, and he just snaps. He raised his voice and said something along the lines of, "What are you hiding from me? Just be honest. Why are you so desperate to keep me out of your fucking apartment?" I was so confused I actually just kept quiet. He dropped me off, but I could see his car across from my apartment for about half an hour before he actually left. About 5 minutes later, he left. He let me know that he's home safe, and he thinks he's starting to fall for me, so naturally I'm freaked out, because I made it clear that I didn't want anything serious. He said he felt the same. I said to him, if that's the case, I think we should take a break from hanging out with each other. About 5 days later, he messages me and asks if we can go out for dinner again. He found an Indian cuisine place he knows I'll love. I tell him it's cool. He should just send me the address. He tells me that he'll pick me up. So 7 p.m. comes. He tells me he's downstairs. And as I go down to meet him, I see he's standing at my gate. I pressed the remote control to open the gate, and he walked inside to meet me. Show me which one's yours. I'd love to see how you live. Not hi, or how are you? That's his opening line, so now I'm naturally unsettled. I say to him that I'm starving. Could we go for dinner, and I'll show you my place at a later stage. At dinner, he gets a call again. This time, he didn't step away. Yeah, I don't know. I can let you know in about 10. He then turns to me. Am I sleeping by you tonight? No, I don't know. I have to work tomorrow. Yes, me too. Then back to the caller. I'll let you know, okay? No, you're not. Can you just give me your things, please? And do what with them? Take them to that girl you're seeing. I'm done asking you. Now, I'm sitting here in absolute shock and terror. What in the fuck is going on here? Our food arrives, and we barely speak. I say to him, why did you ask me if you can sleep over by me? We're not spending time together like that. You know this. He then spins the story about how he just wants to hang out and again, see how I live. I then say to him, very frankly, that I don't like having strangers in my apartment. He gets very touched, and the bill arrives. As per usual, I pay for myself. He pays for himself. I say to him, I'll get an Uber home. And he says, what's the use? I already know where you live. Let me drop you off. By now, I'm already decided that this will be the last time I see him. I get into his car, and I reach for my jumper that I threw in the back when he fetched me. I notice a bag in the back of the car full of clothes and toiletries, as well as a pillow. I don't think much of it. I don't personally drive or own a car, but I know my sister always has the most random shit on the back seat of her car. On the way home, he's dead silent, when suddenly he says, do you know how selfish you are? I've had no issue driving you around, but you don't want me to sleep over by you? I say to him that I've never had an issue with Ubering, and if he's so touched, I also have no issue with paying him what the Ubers would have cost me. I'm over this, and I'm not even playing nice anymore. His phone rings again. Your stuff is in the security boom at the gate, Pete. Stay with your girlfriend, or stay with your mom. You're fucked for taking advantage of everyone like this. I don't speak to my mom. You know this, you bitch. And then hangs up. I then think this is maybe an ex-girlfriend that he needs to collect things from before I've even had a chance to process what has just happened. He turns to me and starts yelling at me. I have nowhere to go. Are you fucking happy, you spoiled bitch? Living off mommy and daddy's money? Getting driven around by me like I fucking work for you, bitch? My whole body got stiff with fear. I don't know if I'm going to cry or throw up. In my head, I'm just planning on how I'm going to grab my bag the second he stops and run straight for the cafe under my apartment. If you run through the cafe, you can get to the gate that takes you to the back part of my apartment, and it works with fingerprint access. There wasn't time to still find my keys in my bag, and I didn't want the main gate I normally use to open wide enough for him to get in when I go in. He stops at my apartment, and as planned, I jump out, run into the cafe, run out the back, through the little gate, up to the second floor. My apartment was on the fourth floor. I hammered on a neighbor's door. I went inside and told her and her husband everything that happened and asked if they would mind calling the cafe to explain why I ran through with no explanation and in such a state. I blocked Pete, and I haven't seen him since. I'm still not sure what his case was. From what I gathered, he was basically homeless, and I think he wanted to get into my apartment to maybe sleep over there for a while. I'm not sure if the girl that kept calling him was also a Tinder date that let her into his apartment, and he just never left. All I know is that he scared the living daylights out of me, and I never ever want to see him again. So I downloaded Tinder when I was 18, and being single in a big city, I ended up going on a lot of fun dates. One guy really caught my attention because, well, he was really attractive. We chatted a bit, and I felt pretty into him, so I decided we could meet for coffee. He was sweet, charming, and we had a great conversation about school, art, and music. We found out we were both musicians, and the date was going so well that I agreed to walk the few blocks back to his house so he could play some music for me. I was new to online dating and was still fairly naive, so I followed him into his weird converted garage bedroom and sat down on the couch. While he pulled out his keyboard, he played for a while, and I started getting a little antsy. He was super into the music and kinda getting aggressive with the keyboard. He was slamming keys down and making these weird noises, so I shot up out of my seat and told him that I should get going. He totally went back to normal. His tone changed and his posture became less hunched back. So when he apologized for getting carried away, I agreed to sit back down on the couch so we could talk more. He came and sat down next to me, and we went back to our earlier conversation. He seemed back to normal and nice. So when he asked if he could kiss me, I agreed. He leaned in toward me, and I closed my eyes waiting, and I waited, but didn't feel his lips, so I opened my eyes and saw him staring at me. I threw my head back surprised, but he had snaked his hand back toward my hair and intertwined his fingers so I couldn't move. He then inhaled deeply and told me, "You smell like you're Jewish. I can tell because you smell like my aunt's house." I was totally freaked out at this point, partially because I am Jewish, and tried to wiggle away from him frantically stating that I had to go. He then jumped on top of me, and to my horror, started sobbing, yelling that he's so sorry he made me uncomfortable. His body weight was completely preventing me from moving, so I forced myself to rub his back. I told him that I wasn't uncomfortable at all, and that he was really sweet. He made me promise over and over again that I'd see him again before finally getting up off of me. I moved to the door and tried calmly to tell him that I really needed to go. He was blocking my way, and all I could think of was that I needed him to let me leave. I couldn't fight him off. He told me I needed to kiss him before I could leave, and I quickly pecked him on the lips. He smiled at me, and I was glad that he didn't expect more. "Call me, please. I think that went well," he said, as he opened up the garage door, and I scurried off. I called my mom and started crying as soon as I was far enough away. She called a cab home, and I blocked him. I saw him once after that on campus, and that was enough for me, so I hope we never meet again. Very loosely had mutual friend. He was friends with my old roommate, who I no longer was in contact with for very different reasons. I found out after he knew her because he sold her drugs. I did in fact contact the police. This happened when I was 18. I'm 22 now. Nothing more came out of it. He did share that he had really bad anxiety. However, I was not aware that he was self-medicating with drugs, which were probably the cause of this incident. Last I heard, he was in another state growing marijuana and hasn't tried to contact me in almost 2 years. So about 4 years ago, I was doing a year abroad in Switzerland as part of my degree. Just before leaving, my boyfriend and I ended our relationship as he was off to America and myself to Switzerland. Anyway, I was quite bummed at first, and then decided it'd be fun to download Tinder and just piss about and date meaninglessly, as I wasn't going to be there for longer than an academic year. So I went on quite a few dates. Some were god-awful and some were with pretty decent people. I was in Geneva, so there were people from everywhere basically. A few months in, I matched with a French guy, and we were chatting for a while. I was 20 at the time, and I had my age preference set to something like 20 to 27, so I've been chatting with this French guy, I'll call him Pierce, for a couple of weeks, and he seems quite cool. He's 27, so a fair bit older, and he's a science secondary school teacher at an all-girls school. So we went for a drink, and he buys us quite a few rounds, which is great because it's Switzerland, and I'm a poor student. By the end of the night, I'm pretty drunk, and I remember making out with him, then getting dropped back to my student accommodation by Pierce. Anyway, I see him a couple of other times after this, and he's always pushing the alcohol when we are together. One evening, I slept over as it was too late for me to get back, and I wake up in the morning and he'd taken off my bra whilst I was asleep. He was wide awake, rubbing my back and staring at me. I hadn't slept with him either. It had just been making out so far. Then he told me his mom was coming to visit, and did I want to meet her. I decided that I was done with this weirdo, so when I left I was planning on what to say to get rid of him. Anyway, back home later, I got a text that said something in broken English like, "We sleep did beautiful," smiley face, and I just left it on read. Later that evening, I got a call from him, but I just let it go to voicemail. When I listened to it, he sounded really upset and said that he had to confess something to me because he was falling in love with me and needed to be honest. He revealed that he had lied about his age. This reminded me of that episode in Friends where Monica accidentally sleeps with a high school student thinking he was in his 20s. This guy looked quite young, so I thought he had lied and was younger than 27. He's actually 35. I know that's not particularly old, but to date a 20-year-old knowing she thinks you're young, I find weird. I blocked him on Facebook and on my phone, and just sort of got on with the last week of term. He turned up at the reception desk one day, having known where I lived because he dropped me home that once. The receptionist asked him to leave and informed me, as he got quite insistent so they warned me. I didn't hear from him again after this, which was good, and I was flying back to the UK in a week for the Christmas holidays. During the holidays, I got a random Facebook friend request from a pretty legitimate looking profile, so I accepted it, just in case I knew them. Bad idea. I get a huge great essay from Pierce saying I tracked your flight all the way back home to check you got home okay. Okay, creep. I blocked this other profile and got a message request from another profile about a week later saying he had checked flights from Bristol to Geneva online and decided that I would have chosen the cheaper one closer to term, so he will meet me and we can chat. Now, I don't know if he just turned up at the airport every time a flight from Bristol came in, but yeah, when I landed, and I didn't think he'd be there because who would be able to guess the exact flight I was on? The minute I come through the gates, I see him holding a sign with my name on it and some flowers. Luckily, he was distracted at the time, so I managed to slip by and got on the train into the city. My friend was already back, so I told her to meet me, and then we went to the police because this guy was fucking weird. Didn't have any trouble with him after this, as he probably found someone else to obsess over. But again, he's a teacher to girls 11 to 18. So gross. Anyway, let's not meet again, Pierce. I hope you're still not hanging around at the airport. Let me start by stating I am a 24-year-old female, downloaded Tinder to see what it was all about. I didn't put too much thought into it. I never took it seriously. I never take much seriously. Most of the things I do are for shits and giggles. I think I tend to forget that the internet is not a game, and there are real-life people behind that screen. I get on the bus back home after a long day of running errands. I sit down, and from the corner of my eye, I notice a heavy-set man staring at me. I am used to being stared at, so I ignore him. Also note my Tinder account has been officially terminated months ago. I sneeze. He said, "Bless you." I said, "Thank you." He was a heavy-set guy with full hair, green eyes, and an olive complexion. He then hands me a tissue, and then he gives me a piece of gum, and I say thanks and threw it in my backpack. 1 mile, he said. Based on how he speaks, I think he might be a little on the special side. His voice was low and slow. I'm like, huh? He says, 1 mile. That was your Tinder. It said you were 1 mile away. I recognize you. We talked for a bit, but then you stopped chatting. He then gives me one of those chocolate balls that are wrapped in red all fancy like. I don't know what they're called. I then nervously giggle, and I told him I had deleted my account. To be honest, I don't even remember chatting with this guy. I would just swipe right on any and everybody. He asked me repeatedly for my number, and I gave it to him because I'm really bad at rejecting people in person. He immediately called to confirm if it was my number. At this point, I got off at a different bus stop and sped walked my ass home. I threw away his candies and blocked his number. So, in November of 2016, I went through a pretty bad breakup. In October 2017, I finally felt comfortable enough to try to get back into the dating world. So, like a moron, I got on Tinder, and it wasn't my first rodeo with Tinder, but this was the strangest thing that happened to me. So, towards the end of October, I met a guy named Dave on Tinder, and from the looks of it, he was an okay guy. He was funny and a gentleman. Didn't ask for anything inappropriate. It seemed fine. We talked for about 2 weeks and set up a time to go on a date. We decided to meet in the city where he had recently moved to, which was about 35 minutes away from my house. I got to the bar to wait for him, and he was 15 minutes late. He walked in and looked relatively similar to his picture, which I was happy about. And then he opened his mouth to talk, and he had a very strange voice, like he was always on the verge of crying. Very weird. He had some tattoos on his face, including the all-seeing eye. Trying to break the tension, I jokingly said, "Illuminati confirmed. Tell me all your secrets." And he goes, "What the hell are you talking about? Don't say that kind of stuff in public." I just kind of laughed it off, and he was being real weird. He then says, "You know that people who pry are people who die?" I just looked at him, and I genuinely did not know how to respond. Fast forward about 20 minutes, and a couple of my friends came to the bar at my urging. I moved to sit on the same side as him, so that my friends could sit on the same side of the booth. The minute I sat down, he puts his hand on my knee and squeezes, and not like, "Oh, I'm interested," but a real hard fucking squeeze. I looked at him to stop, and he leans over and whispers, "You have lovely kneecaps." Like, boy, what? By the time my friends left, he had 7 beers. It was Tuesday. As I go to close my tab, he stands behind me, and he had a boner. Full mass boner. I very quickly sign my receipt and step away. As I'm getting ready to say goodbye, it starts raining, and he then informs me that he walked to the bar from his house and asked for a ride home. Reluctantly, I agreed. And on the very short drive to his house, he informs me that it's not actually his house, that he is living in his sister's basement. When I finally parked in front of his house, he leans over to kiss me, and I tried to give him the cheek, and he physically turns my head and puts his entire tongue in my mouth, and I pull away, and this guy did it again. I finally pulled away and said, "Get the fuck out of my car," and he responds with, "I am in love with you. I knew from the moment I saw your pictures. You have to come inside and meet my sister and her husband." I told him that if he didn't get out of my car, I was calling the police, and he started tearing up and got out of my car. So weird boner Illuminati guy. Let's not meet again.